Welcome to Manage People and Meeting Processes. My name is Bruce. You would receive a learner guide and a workbook from your facilitator, as well as a portfolio of evidence. We will be looking at two modules in this course. At the end of each module, you'll be expected to complete class activities in your workbook, and at the end of the second module, the last module, you'll be expected to complete your portfolio of evidence. Let's have a look and see which unit standards will be making up this course. These are the two unit standards which make up this course, and let's have a look and see what is the agenda for this course. First thing, we're going to be looking at number one, how do we apply basic human resource principles in a new venture? And number two, how do we coordinate meetings, minor events, as well as travel arrangements? Let's look at the first module today, which is going to be applying of basic human resource principles in a new venture. These are your module outcomes. Firstly, we're going to be looking at how do we comply with relevant human resource legislations, identify any and compile basic employment policies and procedures, identify and plan for human resources needs of a new venture, and then how do we implement the human resources needs of that actual new venture. Let's have a look and see how do we apply basic HR principles in a new venture. Employees can be considered as a resource and an asset of your new business venture. In fact, human resources, that is the people side of your business, are one of the most important assets of your new venture. An asset is a useful or valuable quality, person, or thing. Your new venture will need to have the human resource policies and procedures in place in order to meet your organization requirements for an effective workforce. Human resource management encompasses, firstly, recruiting the best people for the organization, interviewing, screening, and selecting, training staff, personal development, as well as professional development, clarifying organizational roles, as well as drawing up job descriptions. Also, conducting staff evaluations and salary negotiation, handling of staff conflict resolution, and providing guidelines for the process. Maintaining staff personal records in accordance with privacy laws, as well as taking care of employee benefits, which includes superannuation, leave, etc. Also, part and parcel of the principles and practices is to also look at the well-being of person in line with the occupational health and also safety guidelines. Looking after general wellness of staff, creating a safe environment free of violence, discrimination, or fear. Matching, finding, and retaining personnel who can actually achieve the long-term organizational goals of the organization, but also adhering to relevant workplace legislation on any unfair dismissal laws, discrimination laws, etc. Also ensuring the workload is shared and that people aren't overburdened. And here are the HR principles and practices. An example of this is in your learner guide as well. Complying with relevant human resource legislation. Human resource legislation regulates the workplace as well as the employer and employee benefits and labor relation. It also is important to comply with legislation in order to ensure the following. Firstly, that your new venture is actually compliant with the current legislation. You'll also be able to handle labor matters in the workplace, enforce the law as stipulated in the workplace, but also staff we must respect the fair but also consistent application of the HR principles. Please refer to page 11 for the different list of legislations pertaining to HR. Identify and explain the legislation that applies to employment. The following legislation is the most important acts mentioned above that apply to employment. Firstly, you have Labour Relations Act 66 of 1995. As amended, will set out what are the laws that actually govern labour in South Africa. Then you have the Basic Conditions of Employment Act 75 and 97, as amended, ensures social justice by establishing the rights, but also the duties of employers, but also employees. Employment Equity Act 55 and 1998 will contain provisions that will promote employment equity, which includes provisions prohibiting unfair discrimination, regulating affirmative action, and establishing a Commission of Employment Equity. Interpreting and applying employment conditions for your own venture. All employers must display a code of the summary of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act in the workplace. Employees or issues covered in the Act is firstly the regulation of the working times, leave, particulars of employment and remuneration, termination of employment, prohibition of employment of children and enforced labour, as well as protection of employees against discrimination. Implementing policy to ensure equity in a new venture. A policy which ensures equity in the workplace is a program that seeks to redress past discrimination through active measures. This is to ensure equal opportunity as in employment. Only companies that employ 50 or more people are actually required to comply with the Employment Equity Act. Please read further on pages 14 to 15 in your learner guide. Now, understanding what are the roles of employees, trade unions, and employees in the workplace. The Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1993 requires the employer to bring about and maintain, as far reasonable, practicable, a work environment that is safe and without risk to the health of their workers. The employee and the employer must then share the responsibility for health and safety in the workplace. Both parties must proactively identify dangers and develop control measures to make the workplace safe. A trade union or labour union is an organisation of workers who have banded together to achieve common goals in key areas such as wages, hours, and working conditions. Please complete class activity 1 in your workbook. All right, identifying and compiling basic employment policies and procedures. Employers normally compile policies that set out the rules and procedures that their employees need to know. These policies help employees to understand what the employer expects of them and how they should actually carry out certain activities. They also inform employees of the rules and rewards available to them. While policies focus on principles, procedures then deal with the how-to end of the equation. Please read pages 17 to 23 in your learner guide. Here are policies and procedures which is taken an extract from your learner guide. Firstly, you need to develop a policy, agree the policy, implement it, monitor, review, and then lastly, update the policy. Establishing disciplinary procedures. Each company must have necessary codes of conduct for internal processes such as grievances, discipline, and sexual harassment. Once drafted specifically for your company, the employees must be tutored on each content and contract and code. The purpose of a disciplinary code and procedures is to regulate standards of conduct and incapacity within an organization. The aim of discipline is to correct unacceptable behavior and to adopt a progressive approach in the workplace. Please read pages 23 to 25 in your learner guide for further information regarding disciplinary procedures. Establishing grievance procedures. It is advisable to raise your concerns with your manager or supervisor in writing before taking the matter outside the workplace, with outsiders meddling in internal workplace management matters. One would prefer the matter to be dealt with internally prior to the intervention of a third party from outside. Where possible, communication should be in writing. It is critical to put together as much proof as possible that you have attempted to actually try and resolve the issue before the matter is taken outside the workplace. This will strengthen your case if you need to take it further to the CCMA. Please read pages 25 to 27 for further information in your learner guide. Implement recruitment procedures. Many organizations realize significant benefits just from mapping out what they currently do and do not do, often realizing that things they thought were done were actually not done. Please read pages 27 to 31 for more information on how to actually recruit staff. Please complete class activity 2 in your workbook. Now, to identify and plan for the human resources needed for a new venture. A human resources manager job is complex, and he or she must decide on the types jobs for the new venture will offer. What skills are required to actually do the job? What are the job specifications? What are market-related salaries? What are the benefits for employees, etc.? The HR manager must always keep in mind what is best for the organization as well as what is best for the employees when they plan for the human resource needs for their actual new venture. A basic skills survey is designed to actually assess what skills are needed in certain core areas. Users are presented with a series of statements describing increasingly difficult tasks, and they are actually asked to indicate which activities they feel they could successfully perform today. These skills statements are concrete activities that illustrate advancing levels of achievement. Many small businesses start with only one individual, which is the actual entrepreneur. As that business will develop and expand over time, the workload increases and the entrepreneur might not have time or skills required to cope with all the demands of the enterprise. The entrepreneur then must decide whether to remain a one-man operation, refuse additional business, or to recruit additional staff members and hopefully increase the output of the business. Determine the cost implication for employing staff. Decide what you want to employ the staff for, but also what their working hours will be. Draw up a job description and person specification. Draft a contract of employment and put in place employment policies such as equal opportunities, discipline, and grievance procedures. Ensure that you have sufficient budget for the posts, and then decide whether you will actually make a contribution to the pension for your employee. If so, include those costs in your budget. Then draw up a basic profile for each person to be employed. The first step is to draw up a job description, which is to do a thorough job analysis. This is an in-depth study of the actual job. The job analysis will examine all the tasks and sequences of tasks necessary to perform the job. It is also at the knowledge and skills needed for the actual position itself. Please complete class activity 3 in your workbook. Implementing the human resources needed for a new venture. If you want your new venture to succeed, you will need to employ the right people with the right skills in the right job. Before you employ staff, you will have to gather and analyze information in respect to the skills by outlining your staff requirements, which includes a description of the specific skills that people working for you will have to have. Compiling job descriptions for the specified positions identified means you need to include the following: duties as well as responsibilities, what knowledge and skills and attitudes are required, what are the credentials and experience required for the job, as well as any special requirements. Please read and see the example on pages 38 and 39 in your learner guide. Now, to undertake selection and recruitment of new staff. Most recruitment systems will be simple, with stages that can be followed as a routine whenever there is a vacancy to be filled, and which can be monitored and adapted in the light of experience. There's going to be a pre-recruitment meeting. Advertising will then take place. Compiling of a position description. Interviewing the candidate. Doing performer reference checks on the candidate. And then make a final selection, or may eventually make a final offer to the candidate you have selected. Drawing up of employment contracts. An employment contract is an agreement between the employer and employee, under which the employee undertakes to do work for the employer in subordination to the management and supervision of the employer, and the employer undertakes to remunerate the employee for such work, but also provide the working conditions prescribed in the agreement between the parties, basically a collective agreement of law or administrative legislation. The Basic Conditions of Employment Act requires that employers give workers certain details of their employment in writing. For example, the employer and worker details, worker's occupation or a brief description of the work, what are their payment details going to be, as well as what are their leave details and any notice or contract period that needs to be served. Informing new recruits or employees of their duties. After the interview and selection process is completed, the successful candidate must be approached with an offer of employment, which should include the following: the starting date, their salary, benefits and date of remuneration, what is a job title, what is a job description, any grievance and disciplinary codes and procedures, general information about the leave, as well as any medical aid and pension fund, and a notice period. Communicate plans that relate to legislative matters to staff and relevant stakeholders. Plans that relate to legislative matters can be communicated to staff and relevant stakeholders by the use of human resources management policies and procedures, and these are followed, reviewed, and updated accordingly. You should encourage an environment whereby employees feel fairly treated, appreciated, and are able to raise their grievances without fear of victimization. Managing the employee's performance. Performance management is a very important part of managing but also developing of your staff. Individual staff performance must be accurately measured against performance goals so that you can either reward or develop the actual employee. Drawing up a performance contract is to actually establish the purpose of the job and then to actually analyze the functions or outputs and key performance areas of the actual job itself. Once agreed, the performance agreement will constitute the criteria for performance review. A performance review is a process of assessing current performance by an individual by rating that level of achievement of actual output against what is the required target outputs as agreed in the performance agreement at the end of a specified review period. Conducting a performance review by doing a performance review interview. Step 1. When you do the interview, you need to clarify the purpose of the interview. Then ask for employee feedback. Then managers will give feedback. And then lastly, an agreement will be reached between both manager and employee. Compiling and implementing basic development plans to address development needs. The need for staff training can be identified in a number of ways, such as doing interviews, through feedback from colleagues, or by competence or knowledge tests, by observing work taking place, or from an appraisal document, or even from a person's CV. Skills audits or training needs analyses are conducted to actually establish the development needs of employees, and these are then recorded in a personal development plan. Implementing retrenchment procedures. In order to win a retrenchment case at the CCMA or Labour Court, the employer must fulfill its onus of proving that the retrenchment was fair in all respects. It is the employer who has the duty of proving that there was a genuine and valid reason for retrenching staff in the actual first place. Steps to follow would be, firstly, to decide to actually go ahead and retrench, go through a consultation process, then disclosure of information would be in writing, criteria for selection, and then number of employees that would be dismissed. Please complete class activity 4 in your workbook. Thank you.